Sometimes it feels as though the weight of the world is too heavy to carry. The pain, the confusion, the relentless turmoil. It can seem like there's no way out. We might feel lost, broken, or as if healing is a far-off dream. But let me tell you this, healing begins with a single step, a moment where we acknowledge our pain, our suffering, and the courage it takes to face it. This journey isn't easy, but it's one that we all can take. So, if you're standing on the edge of despair, know this. The path to healing is waiting for you, and though the road may be difficult, it is also filled with hope, resilience, and the promise of peace. Number 1. Understanding mental turmoil. Mental turmoil is a deeply unsettling state that many people experience at some point in their lives, yet it remains difficult to define or fully understand. It encompasses a wide range of intense, emotional, psychological, and even physical discomfort that emerges when a person faces overwhelming stress, confusion, or inner conflict. The first step in addressing mental turmoil is acknowledging that it's not just a passing moment of sadness or frustration. It's a complex storm of thoughts, emotions, and physical sensations that can cripple a person's ability to think clearly, make decisions, or even function in daily life. Imagine being trapped in a maze of negative thoughts, feeling as though there's no way out, and every turn leads to more confusion and fear. This sense of being lost is one of the hallmarks of mental turmoil. It's as if everything around you is spinning out of control and you're powerless to stop it. The causes of mental turmoil are vast and varied. It could stem from trauma, anxiety, depression, chronic stress, or even an unexpected life change like losing a job, the end of a relationship, or the death of a loved one. What makes mental turmoil so challenging is that it's not always visible to others. On the outside, a person may seem fine, even functioning normally, but inside, they could be struggling with racing thoughts, overwhelming emotions, and a deep sense of despair. The mind, in its constant quest for resolution and peace, can sometimes become its own worst enemy, turning minor anxieties into monstrous fears. This constant inner battle creates a noise that drowns out clarity and peace, leaving the person with a sense of hopelessness. What adds to the difficulty is the societal expectation that we should be able to handle our emotions and keep going, regardless of how hard things may get. It's almost as if there's an unspoken rule that you should be able to overcome any challenge with enough willpower or strength. But mental turmoil doesn't work that way. It's not about being weak or unable to handle life's challenges. It's about how the mind and emotions react to those challenges and how they can sometimes spiral into a place where it feels impossible to regain control. It's important to remember that mental turmoil can take many forms, and what may feel like a simple problem to one person could be a crippling weight to another. No two experiences of mental turmoil are the same. Some may experience it as an ongoing low-grade anxiety, while for others, it could come in waves of panic or deep sadness. The key to understanding mental turmoil is accepting that it's a real and valid experience, regardless of how it manifests or how intense it becomes. Understanding mental turmoil also means recognizing that it's not just an individual struggle. It's often a product of the environment, society, and the pressures we face in our daily lives. Modern life is full of expectations, deadlines, and constant comparisons that can push people beyond their limits. The increasing pressures to succeed, appear happy, and be perfect on social media can add to this turmoil, making individuals feel isolated, unseen, or misunderstood. When the weight of mental turmoil becomes unbearable, silence often becomes the default response. This silence is not born from a lack of wanting to communicate or share one's pain. Rather, it is the result of feeling like no one will truly understand or help. Or even worse, fearing that speaking out will be met with judgment or dismissal. It's during these times that people may retreat inwardly, putting on a facade of normalcy while quietly struggling with the emotional storm raging within. This silence is not a sign of weakness, but rather a coping mechanism, a way to protect oneself from the judgment or rejection that may come with opening up. Understanding mental turmoil requires compassion, both for oneself and for others. It involves recognizing the invisible struggles that many people face, even when they appear to be fine on the surface. In doing so, we can start to create a culture where mental health is treated with the same care and concern as physical health, and where the silence that often accompanies mental turmoil is met with support and understanding. Number 2, why people become silent. There are times in life when we find ourselves in situations that are too overwhelming to express in words. People become silent for many reasons, some of which are deeply tied to their emotional, mental, and social states. The silence often isn't a choice, but a defense mechanism. When faced with pain, anxiety, fear, or confusion, people may retreat into silence because they feel that speaking would either not make a difference or could make things worse. Imagine the feeling of being trapped in your thoughts, where the weight of your emotions is too heavy to articulate. This is often where silence comes into play. For some, silence is a shield, a way to protect themselves from further hurt or judgment. There's a fear that speaking about one's pain may lead to rejection, misunderstanding, or even anger from others. And so, rather than face the vulnerability of opening up, silence becomes the safer option, a means of avoiding the emotional risk that comes with expressing raw feelings. Sometimes, the silence is born out of the belief that no one will understand. When people go through a struggle, especially mental turmoil, they may feel that their pain is too complex or unique for others to truly grasp. In these cases, silence becomes a form of self-preservation, as the individual might feel like their emotions are alienating them from others. There's also the fear of burdening others with their problems, especially when society often portrays strength as being able to handle everything alone. This type of silence is not necessarily a passive choice. It's often the result of feeling isolated and unheard, leading someone to bottle up their feelings instead of sharing them. On another level, silence can also be a symptom of hopelessness. When a person feels like there's no way out of their turmoil, no matter how much they scream internally, they may simply give up on trying to explain themselves. They feel as though their efforts to reach out or express themselves have been futile in the past, and so silence becomes their new way of coping. In moments of despair, it's easier to withdraw and stop trying to communicate when the world around them seems unyielding. Silence then becomes a form of acceptance, an acceptance that their internal world may never match the external reality, and that speaking is only a reminder of that disconnect. Additionally, silence can stem from exhaustion. Mental turmoil can drain someone so deeply that they simply no longer have the energy to communicate. The mental fatigue that comes from constantly battling with one's own thoughts can create a state of numbness, where words seem inadequate or too much of a burden. In these moments, it's not about wanting to be silent. It's more about feeling like words cannot adequately capture the weight of the emotions being felt. It's easier to remain silent than to try and explain something that feels unexplainable. In many cases, people become silent because they are emotionally overwhelmed, unable to process what they are going through, or they fear that their feelings will not be received with the empathy they need. Over time, this silence can create a growing distance between them and others, leading to a sense of isolation. The people who care about them might not even know what's going on because they aren't being given the chance to help. This silence, however, isn't permanent. It can be broken when someone finally finds the courage to reach out, whether through speaking or writing, to share the thoughts and emotions they've been holding back for so long. The challenge lies in understanding why people go silent in the first place, and realizing that this silence is often a cry for help in itself. In conclusion, people don't become silent just out of choice. It is often a coping mechanism, a way to shield themselves from further harm, a form of protection when the world feels too overwhelming. Understanding this silence, showing empathy, and allowing space for individuals to break their silence at their own pace is crucial for mental well-being. Silence is not always a sign of indifference. It's often a reflection of pain, confusion, and vulnerability. And in recognizing that, we can start to break down the barriers that keep us from truly understanding one another. Number 3, the cost of silence. Silence is often seen as a refuge, a moment of peace or quiet contemplation. But for many, it becomes a dangerous and damaging prison, especially when it's used as a shield against emotional or mental turmoil. The cost of silence, particularly when faced with overwhelming mental struggles, can be far more profound than we realize. In a society that often prizes stoicism and silence, we are taught from a young age to endure, to keep our struggles to ourselves, and to power through discomfort without speaking up. But this approach, though seemingly strong, is often a mask for the deep, hidden consequences of not expressing one's emotions. Silence in the face of mental turmoil isn't simply a passive state. It is a profound act of self-neglect, an unconscious agreement to bear a burden alone. The first cost of silence is the erosion of one's mental and emotional health. When a person is suffering from anxiety, depression, or trauma and chooses to remain silent, they are essentially holding those emotions inside, allowing them to grow unchecked. Over time, these feelings don't disappear, they intensify, build up, and can spiral into more serious mental health issues. The longer someone remains silent, the more they internalize their pain, often leading to a sense of isolation and despair. This mental burden becomes even heavier as the person is left alone with their thoughts, with no external outlet to help process or release those feelings. Silence also breeds misunderstanding and miscommunication. When people withhold their struggles or emotions, others around them, whether friends, family, or colleagues, are left in the dark, unaware of the depth of the pain or difficulty the person is experiencing. This lack of communication can lead to feelings of alienation, as the person feels disconnected from the people they care about. In some cases, others may misinterpret silence as indifference or disinterest, further exacerbating feelings of loneliness and confusion. The silent person may start to believe that they have no one to turn to, no one who will understand their internal battles. This isolation can quickly turn into a sense of worthlessness, deepening the mental turmoil. Another significant cost of silence is the loss of opportunity for help and healing. When we are silent about our struggles, we often miss out on the chance to receive support from others. Seeking help is not a sign of weakness, rather, it is a courageous step toward healing. However, if we choose to remain silent, we close off this opportunity for support, whether it be from a friend, therapist, or support group. In some cases, people may silence themselves because they fear judgment or rejection. They may worry that speaking out about their struggles will make them appear weak, needy, or incapable. However, by staying silent, they are only reinforcing their pain, making it harder to break free from their mental and emotional burdens. This silence, while it may appear to protect us in the short term, ultimately compounds the very issues we hope to avoid. It prevents us from processing and healing. It leads to a disconnect with others, a belief that we are alone in our struggles. It traps us in a cycle of self-neglect and emotional imprisonment. As silence becomes our coping mechanism, we forget that there is strength in vulnerability, that opening up to others is not a sign of defeat, but an act of immense courage and self-care. The long-term cost of silence is not just mental and emotional, it can also manifest physically. The stress and emotional suppression caused by silence can take a toll on the body, contributing to a wide range of health issues, from chronic headaches and sleep disturbances to heart disease and weakened immune function. When we refuse to address our mental health, it eventually begins to affect our physical well-being, creating a dangerous feedback loop where our bodies mirror the emotional chaos we are too silent to confront. The cost of silence extends beyond the individual. When people choose silence over communication, it impacts those around them as well. Relationships, whether romantic, familial, or platonic, are built on trust, communication, and mutual understanding. Without open dialogue about struggles, the foundation of those relationships begins to crack. Loved ones may feel confused or hurt, unable to understand why someone they care about is pulling away. This distance can create rifts that are difficult to repair as the silent person becomes more withdrawn and others begin to feel helpless and frustrated. Relationships become strained and the isolation deepens, further perpetuating the cycle of silence. Breaking the silence requires immense courage, but it is necessary for growth and healing. It involves challenging the belief that silence equals strength and recognizing that true strength lies in being vulnerable, in reaching out for support, and in confronting the emotions that we have long kept hidden. The cost of silence is too high. It steals away our peace, our connections, and our well-being. When we choose to break the silence, we open the door to healing, understanding, and ultimately a more fulfilling and connected life. It's time to recognize the high price of silence and begin the difficult but rewarding process of breaking free from its grip. When we choose to speak up, we reclaim our power, our health, and our humanity. Silence may seem safe, but it is an illusion. True safety and peace are found in expression, in connection, and in the willingness to confront our inner struggles with the help of others. Number 4. How silence becomes a form of survival. In the chaotic whirlwind of mental turmoil, where the mind is consumed by overwhelming thoughts and emotions, silence often becomes the last resort, a form of survival. It is a coping mechanism that emerges when the inner world becomes too noisy, too turbulent to process. Imagine being surrounded by a constant storm of worries, fears, and anxieties, each thought like a crashing wave that threatens to drown you. In such moments, silence isn't about choosing peace. It becomes a way of preserving whatever sanity remains. It's the mind's way of trying to protect itself from drowning in the overwhelming flood of emotions. When words fail to capture the depth of what's being felt, silence becomes the most accessible form of expression. It speaks volumes without uttering a single sound. For many, silence serves as a shield, keeping the world at arm's length. It becomes a way of controlling the narrative when everything around them feels uncontrollable. When the pressure of external expectations, societal norms, or personal struggles becomes too much to bear, staying silent can feel like the only way to prevent the internal chaos from spilling out. Silence can be a reflection of emotional exhaustion. When someone has cried out in desperation but has found that no one is truly listening, they retreat into silence. It's not that they don't want to speak, but rather that they have learned that words no longer hold power. The people around them may not understand the weight of what they carry, and so silence becomes the only language that feels authentic. In relationships, this silence can often be misunderstood. To an outsider, it might appear as though the person has become withdrawn, distant, or indifferent. However, in reality, this silence is a form of survival, a temporary withdrawal from the emotional battlefield. It's a way to avoid further injury, to regroup, and to shield the self from emotional vulnerability that could make things even worse. Sometimes, it feels safer to remain silent than to say the wrong thing or to expose the raw, unhealed parts of the soul. In this silence, there is a quiet strength. The individual may not be actively fighting against their inner turmoil, but they are still holding on, finding ways to endure when it feels like everything is falling apart. This silence, however, is not eternal. It is a temporary pause, a space of preservation before the individual is ready to process their pain or confront the world again. It's important to understand that silence in the face of mental turmoil isn't a sign of weakness. It is a form of resistance. It is a way of pushing back against the overwhelming forces that threaten to consume them. For some, this silence can become a lifeline, a way of maintaining a sense of control when everything else seems to be slipping away. But it can also be a form of isolation, a way of building walls around oneself to protect from further harm. Over time, if this silence becomes habitual, it may transform into a state of emotional numbness, where the individual feels disconnected from their feelings and from others. The danger in this silence is that it can be mistaken for peace. The person may appear calm, composed, and in control, but beneath the surface, there's a storm raging that no one can see. The internal turmoil continues to simmer, and without the outlet of expression, it may start to manifest in other ways: physical symptoms, burnout, or even self-destructive behaviors. This is why it's so crucial to understand that silence, while often a necessary form of survival, is not a sustainable solution. It is a temporary shield, but it can only protect so much before the cracks begin to show. True healing comes when the silence breaks, when the person feels safe enough to speak, to share, and to release what they have kept hidden for so long. In the end, silence as a form of survival is a paradox. It is both a necessary tool for enduring the storm, and yet it holds the potential for deeper pain if it is allowed to become permanent. When we witness someone who is silent in the face of their struggles, it's important not to assume that silence equals resolution. We must learn to approach these silences with compassion, offering not just words, but understanding. Sometimes all someone needs is the assurance that they don't have to speak in order to be heard, that their silence is valid, and that they can break it when they are ready. Silence in this context is not a weakness, but rather a quiet resilience, a temporary measure of survival before the storm subsides, allowing the individual to step forward once again into the world. Number 5. Breaking the silence. In a world where silence is often seen as a sign of strength, it can be one of the most isolating and painful experiences for those who are struggling mentally. When life becomes overwhelming and the weight of emotional turmoil feels unbearable, people often choose silence as their response, not out of choice, but because they believe it's the only way to survive. There's a strange paradox within this silence. It's both a defense mechanism and a cry for help, an invisible scream that can be felt by those who truly understand. People who are facing mental turmoil may find themselves unable to articulate their pain because they fear being judged, misunderstood, or invalidated. In these moments, words fail them, and silence becomes their only refuge. But this silence is not peace. It's a loud, resounding echo of internal struggle. The act of breaking the silence, however, is one of the most courageous steps a person can take toward healing. It's a moment of vulnerability where the walls around their pain begin to crumble, allowing others to witness their true selves. Breaking the silence doesn't just mean speaking the words out loud, though. It means confronting the emotions that have been buried so deeply inside for so long. It's like opening a floodgate that has been locked shut by years of societal expectations, fear of vulnerability, and the belief that one's feelings aren't valid enough to be expressed. When someone finally breaks the silence, they're not just speaking to others, they're speaking to themselves, acknowledging their own pain, and finally giving themselves permission to feel. But breaking the silence is never easy. It requires incredible emotional strength and self-awareness. In the process, the fear of rejection, the worry of being seen as weak, and the shame of not being able to handle life's challenges often loom large. People wonder, what if they think I'm overreacting? What if they tell me I should just get over it? What if I can't explain it well enough? These doubts are natural, but they are also a product of a culture that encourages people to hide their emotions instead of processing them. The truth is, no one should have to carry their pain in silence. Our stories deserve to be heard, and more importantly, our stories are often the very thing that connects us to others who are feeling the same way. Breaking the silence is not about exposing vulnerability for vulnerability's sake. It's about breaking free from the isolation that mental turmoil creates and finding solace in shared experiences. As hard as it may be, breaking the silence is a form of reclaiming control over your life. When you speak your truth, you no longer allow the internal chaos to define you. You take the first step toward healing, and you open up the possibility for real, genuine connection with others. Often, we underestimate the power of our voice. We believe that our struggles are too insignificant, or we fear that by opening up, we might burden others. But the reality is that there is no burden in supporting one another, and there is no shame in seeking help. Breaking the silence allows others to step in and offer their support, to listen without judgment, and to provide the reassurance that we are not alone. When you finally break the silence, you'll realize that it's not a single moment of catharsis, but the beginning of a journey. It might take time to rebuild trust in yourself and others. There may be moments where you retreat back into silence, unsure of whether it's safe to speak your truth again. But the more you break the silence, the easier it becomes. Slowly but surely, the fear of judgment fades, and the weight of carrying your emotions alone begins to lift. The act of breaking the silence is not just for those around you. It's for you too. It's for your mental well-being, your emotional health, and ultimately, your freedom. In a world that often values strength through silence, breaking the silence is the ultimate act of courage. It's about honoring your humanity, your feelings, and your right to exist in a world where your voice matters. So, when you find yourself in the depths of mental turmoil and feel like there is no way out, remember that breaking the silence is always an option. It's not a sign of weakness, it's a sign of strength. It's the first step toward reclaiming your life, reconnecting with others, and healing in a world that needs to hear your voice more than ever. The silence is only temporary. When you break it, you begin to step into the light of understanding, compassion, and the profound healing that comes from sharing your truth. Number 6. The path to healing. Healing is a journey that begins when we acknowledge the depth of our pain. It's an arduous path, often winding and filled with obstacles, but it is one that ultimately leads to restoration and peace. When mental turmoil overwhelms us, the mind and body can become consumed with feelings of despair, fear, and confusion. At times, it may seem impossible to imagine a way out, but healing is not about instant relief. It's about taking the first step, no matter how small, toward recovery. It's crucial to understand that healing is not linear. There are good days and bad days, times when we feel empowered, and other moments when the weight of our emotions feels unbearable. This ebb and flow of progress is part of the process. The first step towards healing is acceptance, accepting that pain is part of being human, and it is okay to feel lost or broken. Once we acknowledge this truth, we can begin to take steps toward managing and eventually overcoming the turmoil that we face. The path to healing often involves a combination of self-compassion, time, and external support. Self-compassion means treating ourselves with the same kindness and understanding that we would offer to a friend who is suffering. Instead of blaming ourselves or feeling ashamed of our emotional struggles, we must embrace our vulnerabilities and accept them as part of our human experience. We must learn to let go of the harsh self-judgment and create space for self-care. This could mean allowing ourselves to rest when we're exhausted, seeking moments of joy in small things, or forgiving ourselves for not having all the answers. Time plays a crucial role in healing as well. Mental turmoil doesn't fade overnight. It requires time to process emotions, to confront fears, and to unearth the sources of pain. There is no quick fix to mental distress. It requires patience. And sometimes the healing process feels like waiting for something you can't quite see or understand. But every day that we continue living, every day that we continue to put one foot in front of the other, is progress toward a better version of ourselves. Yet, time alone is not enough. Healing is accelerated by reaching out for support. Often, when we're trapped in our mental struggles, we isolate ourselves, believing that we must face our battles alone. This isolation is a barrier to healing. Seeking help from others, whether it's talking to a therapist, reaching out to a close friend, or even confiding in a support group, can create a space for healing to unfold. Speaking about our pain helps to release some of its grip on our minds, and in turn, it creates opportunities for connection and understanding. It's important to remember that there is no shame in seeking help. The idea that we must suffer in silence or carry our burdens alone is one of the many myths that prevent healing. When we reach out, we acknowledge that we are worthy of care and support, and that we don't have to carry the weight of the world on our own. Healing also requires us to reframe the narrative we tell ourselves. Many of us hold on to a negative, limiting story about ourselves, one that says we are weak, broken, or unworthy of happiness. But in reality, these beliefs are not facts. They are the consequences of mental turmoil and distress. The path to healing involves reshaping these stories, replacing them with narratives of resilience, growth, and hope. This means seeing our struggles not as defining moments of failure, but as opportunities for growth, understanding, and transformation. Healing is about learning to see ourselves as more than the pain we experience. It's about recognizing our capacity to overcome, to rise, and to thrive in the face of adversity. As we continue along the healing journey, we must also learn to let go of the past. Holding on to past wounds or past versions of ourselves that were in turmoil can keep us anchored in the pain, preventing us from moving forward. Letting go doesn't mean forgetting. It means releasing the grip that the past has on our present. It's about learning from our experiences and using them as stepping stones rather than anchors. Each painful experience, each failure, and each moment of suffering can be used as a catalyst for personal growth and deeper self-awareness. Ultimately, healing isn't about returning to who we were before the mental turmoil began. It's about becoming someone new, someone stronger, more self-aware, and more compassionate. It's about discovering that even in the darkest moments, there is a path forward. It's about building resilience, learning from our pain, and emerging from our struggles with a renewed sense of purpose and a deeper understanding of ourselves. Healing is a journey that takes time, but it is one that we must take with faith in the process, in ourselves, and in the possibility of a brighter future. Even when it feels like there is no way to survive the turmoil, we must hold on to the belief that healing is possible, that peace is attainable, and that we can move through the darkness into the light once again. And along the way, we must remember that healing is not a destination. It is a lifelong journey of growth, acceptance, and love for ourselves. As we come to the end of this journey together, remember this: healing is not a destination. It is a continuous unfolding. It is not about erasing the pain, but learning to live with it and emerge stronger. You are not defined by your struggles, but by your ability to rise from them. Every step you take, no matter how small, brings you closer to the person you are meant to become. Keep believing in the possibility of healing, in the power of your own strength, and in the light that exists even in the darkest of times. Your journey to healing is yours alone, and with every step forward, you are rewriting your story, a story of courage, hope, and boundless love for yourself.